Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and I had a subscriber ask a question, which I'll link here for you guys, but he basically wants to know from a bodybuilding perspective, not a strength, not a power perspective, but a development perspective. Size, width, thickness, body composition, detailed back. Is it necessary to do a bunch of accessory exercises, or could someone get away with a simple vertical pull and a horizontal pull with free weights and get total back development? So let me throw on my cap here. I'll skip the line today for you guys, but you know it. Try to answer this question. All right, the cliff notes for those who don't want a really long video. Yeah, you can get away with one vertical pull, one horizontal pull, such as, again, a vertical pull being a pull-up or a chin-up. I don't necessarily recommend using just a lat pull-down for this unless you're a noob and you're not strong enough to do chin-ups or pull-ups, combined with some sort of row or even a deadlift. Absolutely possible to get complete back development. But let's get in there and discuss that a little bit. For those who want further information, how do you get total back development? Because a lot of guys mess up and think that there are different exercises to make the lats, the latissimus dorsi, again, the big kite-like muscle that forms your V-taper, that there are separate muscles to make it wider and thicker. Absolutely not true. The exact same exercises that make it wide make it thick. The reason people think of the thickness there is that there are other muscles involved. There are other muscles that are underneath, above, behind, below the lats that give your body, your torso, that three-dimensional thick look that you see in a lot of guys. And those muscles tend to be the spinal erectors, the thoracic erectors, the lower and middle traps. So those are the muscles you're thinking of that give that three-dimensional back look. So what is the deal with the different exercises there? Why are some better at making it thicker than others? Well, any of your vertical pulling, that's going to be your chin-ups, pull-ups, lat pull-downs, whatever they happen to be, they don't put anywhere near as much load on those support muscles. They tend to put most of the workload on the latissimus dorsi, the lats, the rhomboids, the rear delts, and the biceps. That's where they put their workload, and they de-emphasize all those erectors. And to some extent, they don't even work the traps as much as some of the other movements. Things like the barbell row, whether it's, again, a regular conventional barbell row, Yates row, a Pendlay row, even a dumbbell row, they tend to work the support muscles more, although the dumbbell rows don't work the lower back. Keep that in mind. Anything that's chest supported takes the spinal erectors back out. So you lose some of the benefits to developing a full thick back top to bottom. Exercises like the deadlift, though, excel here also because the deadlift works the lower back even more, and it works all those erectors more, but it de-emphasizes the lats a little bit. And a lot of people are going to argue that. They're going to argue the deadlift doesn't work the lats. We have plenty of studies showing that they do, in fact, work the lats very heavily, very effectively. They just don't work it through a full range of motion. The deadlifts and even rack pulls work the lats. That is a documented scientific fact at this point. We've got plenty of data showing from EMG studies heavy activation once the weights start getting relatively heavy. Absolutely work them. Do they work them as much as a weighted chin-up or a pull-up? No, but they're not far behind. Now, that being said, is it possible for someone with the right genetics to develop total back development, including their lats, from the deadlift? The answer is yes, some guys can. Can everyone do it? No, so I wouldn't rely upon that as my method for total back development. But I think that gives deadlifts a unique role in there, and I'll get to that in a minute too. But for total back development, you need a secondary exercise that works all of those things. You know, and by that same token, there are guys who don't need any horizontal pulling. They can get away with purely deadlifts and rowing and develop a thick, wide, fully detailed back top to bottom. But not everyone has the lower back recovery to do enough workload using those two exercises. Their lower backs tend to give out, their thoracic erectors tend to give out, their core tends to give out in some people. Those areas just aren't as strong enough for them to really focus on the lats because those other muscles tend to wear out first for them if that's the only two exercises they're doing, and they end up getting slightly shortchanged on the lats. They might still end up with really good lats. They just might not be at the maximum best development possible for that individual. So I think your safe bet is to incorporate a chin-up or a pull-up, again, with progressive overload combined with either a vertical pull, a horizontal pull, such as, again, a row, or a deadlift. And I think you can get away with either one, honestly. I don't think you have to say, okay, I'm definitely going to do this one, that one's better than the other. I personally, these days, I like to do just chin-ups with deadlifts, but I deadlift pretty much every workout session. So I deadlift 3 or 4 times a week, and I do chin-ups after I deadlift usually. That's what I do. Is that the right way to do it? Not necessarily, but that ensures total back development. It means that all of the support muscles are going to be worked by the deadlift, and then obviously the lats and everything are going to get plenty of stimulation from the chin-ups. Again, if workload, tension, which is weight, and metabolic fatigue, which is your total volume, if they're sufficient to stimulate growth, that's going to be everything you need for total back development. I don't think you need to incorporate more than 2 exercises. If you're doing 3, I think it's just for fun at that point and personal preference. It's not a necessity. You're not necessarily going to get more thorough development from it. But depending upon the person, it could be some sort of chin-up or pull-up combined with a deadlift, or a chin-up and pull-up combined with a row. And I think that it will be sufficient. Again, if the rows are done right. A lot of guys don't know how to barbell row, and that is something I will point out. Some guys get way too upright and they pretty much turn a row into a shrug, which is great for the traps, but they're not going to get the extra thickness they want from the thoracic erectors and spinal erectors, and that lets the traps take a lot of the work off the lats. So it is possible to de-emphasize the lats too much doing a row, which is kind of silly. You could just do a shrug to work your traps. But some guys pretty much turn it into a shrug. But you could do any of those combinations and it'll be just fine. And again, I mean, perfect example. I think you usually see guys like Chris Jones, who doesn't really like to deadlift a lot. He's actually got pretty good back development. I'll give the guy that. And I think he does that through combinations of pull-ups and rows. Now, I know he does a lot of extra fluff in there because Chris is a high-volume guy, but my point is with that is that it isn't necessary for that guy to do it. He does it just because that's what he enjoys doing. He sees that as his full-time job, is to lift weights. But it isn't necessary to do that, but he's an example that shows you can do it with just that combination. Plenty of other guys have. Dorian Yates kind of went the other route again, but he was noted for his low volume. Of course, Dorian on insane amounts of drugs, but the fact of the matter is his back was still his best body part. And he used his Yates rows combined, I believe, with a deadlift of some type. He didn't deadlift that heavy, surprisingly enough, though, despite his size, but that was his combination and it worked. But at the end of the day, ultimately, I think as long as you're getting some exercise that works the lats completely through the full range of motion, which could be, any sort of chin-up or pull-up done right, but it could also be done with rows, combined with an exercise that works all of the support musculature to give you that thickness, which again, heavy rows, but definitely heavy deadlifts. And deadlifts of any type will do that. It could be your conventional deadlift, it could be your Romanian. I just wouldn't rely upon the sumo deadlift for that, because it is de-emphasizes the back a little bit and puts it more on the thighs. But yeah, conventional deadlift, rack pulls, deficit deadlifts, any of those will get the job done. But again, you could do a more upper back oriented row to do the same thing, and that could again be a Yates row, Pendlay row, barbell row, even a dumbbell row, but again I'd recommend a standing dumbbell row unless you're wanting to just work the lats more and take the spinal erectors out, and then you could do it chest supported or knee supported on a bench. But yeah, can you do it with 2 exercises? Yes, absolutely, and I don't think more than that's necessary. And a lot of it comes down to personal preferences. I personally am a fan of people doing a weighted body weight exercise combined with a deadlift for it. Not because that's necessarily better for total back development. It's because it trains the 2 most opposite performance elements, and I think it produces overall better strength and performance to go with that back size. And to me, that's always going to be the top priority, with oftentimes my recommendation to others and my personal preference. But purely from an aesthetics perspective, which is what he's talking about here, that may not be necessary. But all these guys who do 4 or 5 different exercises for their back, again, I think these are examples of guys who really don't know physiology. They don't understand the functions of the back, and they don't realize they don't need all of these 4 or 5 different exercises. It's just simply not necessary. Yes, the back has a lot of muscles in it. The back seems to be complex. But because most of the good back exercises incorporate so many different muscles in the body, and they work so many muscles effectively and thoroughly, you just don't need a large exercise selection to develop the back. So that's where it becomes a little tricky. That's why some people think, well, I need all these different exercises because it's such a complex muscle system. But it really isn't, because it's a muscle system that's used to working as one unit, and most exercises that are good back exercises work 3, 4, 5 different muscles as primary movers and put heavy focus on them. And the thing that you need to remember is that even the deadlift technically works the entire back. It just doesn't work the lats enough for some guys, and it doesn't work the posterior delts, which makes it a bit of a problem for overall muscle balance. But ultimately, even the deadlift works 90% of the musculature of the back, top to bottom, very effectively. So again, combining the deadlift with any of those, as long as your lower back can handle the total workload of what you're doing, getting you throw in a row, it should be fine. So ultimately, the simple answer to the question again, 2 exercises, as long as they kind of have a different focus, meaning they're working a different function, should be more than sufficient to develop your entire back, top to bottom, width, thickness, detail, everything, as long as workload, tension, and recovery are sufficient. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.